If you think about having this assistant where now I have someone who's a lot less seasoned, but I can have this assistant help me through that process from a maintenance standpoint rather than going to that silver tsunami, that individual who has all that tribal knowledge.
The silver tsunami is a major concern for industries losing experienced workers. Can you walk us through how generative AI-powered knowledge transfer helps bridge the skills gap in real-world scenarios?
Yeah, so the silver tsunami, obviously it's been going on for at least when my entire time in the IoT world and condition monitoring. And so you have this group of people that have all this knowledge and tribal knowledge, and you're having industry companies are having problems hiring people. So how do you bridge that gap of that 30-year tribal knowledge to someone who's getting into the industry or has 5 years? And that's where generative AI comes into play. So what generative AI is, it's kind of making a hybrid assistant. So we've all heard AI assistants, copilots. So if you think about, having this assistant where now I have someone who's a lot less seasoned, doesn't have that that 30-year experience. And now I'm able to go do my maintenance routes. I'm able to get some notification from condition monitoring, but I can have this assistant help me through that process, help me, from a maintenance standpoint, rather than going and stopping what you're doing and going to that silver tsunami, that individual who has all that tribal knowledge. So as these silver tsunami folks retire, generative AI can really kind of take the place of being able to capture that data, that tribal knowledge, documentation, and really have someone who has a lot less experience, but has this assistant who can actually give them the experience of someone who has 20, 30 years. And so it's really, really providing that bridge of that tribal knowledge gap for sure.
You introduced the concept of citizen maintenance workers and the role of generative AI assistants. How does this change the skill set required for industrial workers? And what impact does it have on workforce dynamics?
I've been talking about citizen developers. So think about 10, 15 years ago, you wanted to create a website or an application. Typically, those individuals had to have a computer science degree, right? You had to know how to code, and you had to have someone who did front end and back end. Well, as technology grew and more kind of low code, no code solutions came out, the term citizen developer came out, right? So now you can actually have people who have no technical background that can come in and create a mobile app. They can come in and create a landing page. So you don't necessarily need someone who has that very deep technical skills to be a citizen developer. So what I've done is now taken that term, and because of generative AI and kind of the question I just answered is now you have these maintenance people who, because of generative AI, don't need that 30 years skill set, right? That now I'm a citizen maintenance worker. So now I have this copilot, this AI assistant who can now provide that knowledge gap to me. And now I can perform probably way more expertise maintenance solutions, or not maintenance solutions, but being able to maintain critical assets, repair critical assets through regulatory compliance, just through generative AI.
As industries adopt generative AI for asset management, what challenges do companies face when integrating these technologies with existing systems and workflows? And how can they overcome those challenges?
Yeah, great question. So in especially electrical industry, manufacturing industry, right? It's affinity to change. That is one, right? It's, you're talking about processes that have been done for decades and decades and decades, right? And COVID kind of changed or brought down that barrier of, hey, maybe bringing in some industrial IoT or some digital solution to help automate, to help do condition monitoring. And so when it comes to generative AI, it's all about data, and so the one thing is you don't have the data, right? Everything's manual. Everything's on a piece of paper, PDFs. Two, you have very siloed system of records. So the biggest problem is be able to produce the data to train the generative AI models, but also getting data that is siloed in different system of records. So I think that is the biggest challenge. But as anything, it has to be done in phases. So making sure, getting in there, phase one was like, what data do we need to train these models that we can now create some type of generative AI copilot or assistant to help our maintenance workers, and just do it in a phase, and just also making sure that it, compliance and regulation, and just making sure that you have buy-in from your leadership. So kind of recap is know where the data is, know how to get that data, be able to get all that data into what is called a data lake, and then be able to have that data trained, be part of training a large learning model.
Beyond efficiency gains, what are some unexpected benefits or risks that companies should consider when deploying generative AI in asset management and maintenance operations?
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off my last answer, it's in phases, right? You want to do a proof of concept, something that's very low hanging fruit, that you see the value, your employees see the value, your leadership sees the value, and then just keep building on top of that. And so the risk is, AI's been around for a long time. Machine learning's been around, but generative AI, right? Now everyone has access to some ChatGPT. So understanding the regulations, who owns the data? Where is this data going? So having barriers around what your employees are able to, ask or imprompt in that generative AI, and making sure that it's not going out to the wide world internet. The benefits, it's, talking about the silver tsunami, talking about that citizen maintenance worker, being able to have, a hybrid worker that has the operational efficiencies, operational knowledge, but now has this generative AI assistant to really provide that deep knowledge, that deep technical experience that it takes years to have, but now someone with 3-5 years can have the same ability to do what someone with 20 to 30 years knowledge has.
Looking ahead to 2025 and beyond, what are the biggest innovations or disruptions you anticipate in AI-driven asset management, and how should companies prepare for them today?
The biggest thing for me is really doing automation. If you look at a smart factory journey, right? It all started about digitalizing, doing your inspections from paper to now you're implementing it into a digital format, maybe implementing sensors, right? Now you have IoT, industrial IoT, you have sensors on your assets, you're collecting that data, you're getting real-time notifications. And then once you have that data, now you can get into predictive maintenance, right? Now these machines are, able to say, hey, in 2 weeks, based off this historical data, we believe that these ball bearings are something wrong with this pump. Go ahead and order this part. And then you have generative AI, right? And now you have that information. And so the next iteration of 2025 to me is two parts. Is now with generative AI, now, that's kind of use case that I showed, that will be all automated. It will not have humans. You have predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance is talking to your copilot, and then that copilot is actually ordering the parts, and doing that. And then now the parts get in. Now the generative AI is notifying that maintenance worker that the part's in. They install it, and then now the generative AI is now saying, hey, now we have this new part in, we have sensor data, was it installed correctly? And so you're really going to automate what happens and from an efficiency standpoint, from a downtime standpoint of less human contact, and really leaning in and being, using generative AI and AI to just automate a lot of different processes.
Red Talks features voices driving safety, reliability, and innovation forward in the industrial world. If your work challenges the status quo, we'd like to hear from you. Learn more at redtalk.com/about.